Okay, we'll give this a try. Vegetarian Myth by Leah Keith. This is the introduction or something like that. Chapter 1. Why this book? This was not an easy book to write. For many of you, it won't be an easy book to read. I know I was a vegan for almost 20 years. I know the reasons that compelled me to embrace an extreme diet, and they are honorable, ennobling even. Reasons like justice, compassion, a desperate and all-encompassing longing to set the world right, to save the planet, the last trees bearing witness to the ages, the scraps of wilderness still nurturing fading species, silent in their fur and feathers, to protect the vulnerable, the voiceless, to feed the hungry. At the very least, to refrain from participating in the horror of factory farming. These political passions are born of a hunger so deep that it touches on the spiritual, or they were for me, and they still are. I want my life to be a battle cry, a war zone, an arrow pointed and loosed into the heart of domination, patriarchy, imperialism, industrialization, every system of power and sadism. If the martial imagery alienates you, I can rephrase it. I want my life, my body, to be a place where the earth is cherished, not devoured, where the sadist is granted no quarter, where the violence stops. And I want eating, the first nurturance, to be an act that sustains instead of kills. This book is written to further those passions, that hunger. It is not an attempt to mock the concept of animal rights or to sneer at the people who want a gentler world. Instead, this book is an effort to honor our deepest longings for a just world, and those longings for compassion, for sustainability, for an equitable distribution of resources are not served by the philosophy or practice of vegetarianism. We have been led astray. The vegetarian Pied Pipers have the best of intentions. I'll state right now what I'll be repeating later. Everything they say about factory farming is true. It is cruel, wasteful, and destructive. Nothing in this book is meant to excuse or promote the practices of industrial food production on any level. But the first mistake is in assuming that factory farming, a practice that is barely 50 years old, is the only way to raise animals. Their calculations on energy used, calories consumed, humans unfed are all based on the notion that animals eat grain. You can feed grain to animals, but it is not the diet for which they were designed. Grain didn't exist until humans domesticated annual grasses, at most 12,000 years ago, while aurochs, the wild progenitors of the domestic cow, were around for 2 million years before that. For most of human history, browsers and grazers haven't been in competition with humans. They ate what we couldn't eat, cellulose, and turned it into what we could, protein and fat. Grain will dramatically increase the growth rate of beef cattle. There's a reason for the expression corn-fed. And the milk production of dairy cows. It will also kill them. The delicate bacterial balance of a cow's rumen will go acid and turn septic. Chickens get fatty liver disease if fed grain exclusively, and they don't need any grain to survive. Sheep and goats, also ruminants, should really never touch the stuff. The misunderstanding is born of ignorance, and ignorance that runs the length and breadth of the vegetarian myth, through the nature of agriculture and ending in the nature of life. We are urban industrialists, and we don't know the origins of our food. This includes vegetarians, despite their claims to the truth. It included me, too, for 20 years. Anyone who ate meat was in denial. Only I had faced the facts. Certainly most people who consume factory farm meat have never asked what died and how it died. But frankly, neither have most vegetarians. The truth is that agriculture is the most destructive thing humans have done to the planet, and more of the same won't save us. The truth is that agriculture requires the wholesale destruction of entire ecosystems. The truth is also that life isn't possible without death, that no matter what you eat, someone has to die to feed you. I want a full accounting, an accounting that goes way beyond what's dead on your plate. I'm asking about everything that died in the process, everything that was killed to get that food onto your plate. That's the more radical question, and it's the only question that will produce the truth. How many rivers were dammed and drained? How many prairies plowed and forests pulled down? How much topsoil turned to dust and blown into ghosts? I want to know about all the species, not just the individuals, but the entire species. The chinook, the bison, the grasshopper sparrows, the gray wolves, and I want more than just the number of dead and gone. I want them back. Despite what you've been told and despite the earnestness of the tellers, eating soybeans isn't going to bring them back. 98% of the American prairie is gone, turned into a monocrop of annual grains. Plow cropping in Canada has destroyed 99% of the original humus. In fact, the disappearance of topsoil rivals global warming as an environmental threat. When the rainforest falls to beef, progressives are outraged, aware, ready to boycott. But our attachment to the vegetarian myth leaves us uneasy, silent, and ultimately immobilized when the culprit is wheat and the victim is the prairie. We embraced as an article of faith that vegetarianism was the way to salvation for us and for the planet. How could it be destroying either? We have to be willing to face the answer. What's looming in the shadows of our ignorance and denial is a critique of civilization itself. The starting point may be what we eat, but the end is an entire way of life, a global arrangement of power, and no small measure of personal attachment to it. I remember the day in 4th grade when Miss Fox wrote 2 words on the blackboard: civilization and agriculture. I remember because of the hush in her voice, the gravitas of her words, the explanation that was almost oratory. This was important, and I understood. Everything that was good in human culture flowed from this point. All ease, grace, justice, religion, science, medicine, art were born, and the endless struggle against starvation, disease, and violence could be won, all because humans figured out how to grow their own food. The reality is that agriculture has created a net loss for human rights and culture. Slavery, imperialism, militarism, class divisions, chronic hunger, and disease. The real problem, then, is not to explain why some people were slow to adopt agriculture, but why anybody took it up at all, when it is so obviously beastly. Agriculture has also been devastating to other creatures with whom we share the earth, and ultimately to the life support systems of the planet itself. What is at stake is everything. If we want a sustainable world, we have to be willing to examine the power relations behind the foundational myth of our culture. Anything less and we will fail. Questioning at that level is difficult for most people. In this case, the emotional struggle inherent in resisting any hegemony is compounded by our dependence on civilization and on our individual helplessness to stop it. Most of us would have no chance of survival if the industrial infrastructure collapsed tomorrow, and our consciousness is equally impeded by our powerlessness. There is no 10 simple things list in the last chapter because, frankly, there aren't 10 simple things that will save the earth. There is no personal solution. There is an interlocking web of hierarchical arrangements, vast systems of power that have to be confronted and dismantled. We could disagree about how best to do that, but do it we must if the earth is to have any chance of surviving. In the end, all the fortitude in the world will be useless without enough information to chart a sustainable forward course, both personally and politically. One of my aims in writing this book is to provide that information. The vast majority of people in the U.S. don't grow food, let alone hunt and gather it. We have no way to judge how much death is embodied in the serving of a salad, a bowl of fruit, a plate of beef. We live in urban environments, the last whisper of forests, thousands of miles removed from the devastated rivers, prairies, wetlands, and the millions of creatures who died for our dinners. We don't even know what questions to ask to find out. In his book, Long Life, Honey in the Heart, Martin Prechel writes of the Mayan people and their concept of Kaslimael, which translates roughly as mutual indebtedness, mutual insparkedness. Quote, the knowledge that every animal, plant, person, wind, and season is indebted to the fruit of everything else is an adult knowledge. To get out of debt means you don't want to be part of life, and you don't want to grow into an adult, unquote, one of the elders explains to Prechel. The only way out of the vegetarian myth is through the pursuit of Kaslimael, of adult knowledge. This is a concept we need, especially those of us who are impassioned by justice. I know I needed it. In the narrative of my life, I lost my place. In the narrative of my life, the first bite of meat after my 20-year hiatus marks the end of my youth, the moment when I assumed the responsibilities of adulthood. It was the moment I stopped fighting the basic algebra of embodiment. For someone to live, someone else has to die. In that acceptance, with all its suffering and sorrow, is the ability to choose a different, a better way. The activist farmers have a very different plan than the polemicist writers to carry us from destruction to sustainability. The farmers are starting with completely different information. I've heard vegetarian activists claim that an acre of land can only support 2 chickens. Joel Salatin, one of the high priests of sustainable farming and someone who actually raises chickens, puts that figure at 250 an acre. Whom do you believe? How many of us know enough to even have an opinion? Francis Moore Lappe says it takes 12 to 16 pounds of grain to make 1 pound of beef. Meanwhile, Salatin raises cattle with no grain at all, rotating ruminants on perennial polycultures, building topsoil year by year. Inhabitants of urban industrial cultures have no point of contact with grain, chickens, cows, or for that matter with topsoil. We have no basis of experience to outweigh the arguments of political vegetarians. We have no idea what plants, animals, or soil eat, or how much, which means we have no idea what we ourselves are eating. Confronting the truth about factory farming, its torturous treatment of animals, its environmental toll, was for me, at age 16, an act of profound importance. I knew the earth was dying. It was a daily emergency I had lived against forever. I was born in 1964. Silence and spring were inseparable. 3 syllables, not 2 words. Hell was here, in the oil refineries of northern New Jersey, the asphalt inferno of suburban sprawl, and the swelling tide of humans drowning the planet. I cried with iron-eyed Cody, longed for his silent canoe, and whoops,